Hello and welcome. I'm Samantha Mackay, lead trainer at Maturity, and I'm always amazed at just how helpful it is to know our personality type as well as those of the people closest to us. And today I'm talking with Sandra Etherington, co-host of the podcast Family Personalities, where she talks with parents about how to incorporate personality as part of their approach to parenting. Welcome, Sandra.
Thanks for having me, Samantha.
So excited. So tell me about Family Personalities. How did it come about? What inspired it?
Yeah, so I originally became interested in personality type just personally when I discovered my own personality type. But once I had kids and they came out of me looking very different from myself, and I just began to naturally wonder about their personality types. And I don't know about anyone else, but I guess I didn't really know what to expect when I became a parent. And for some reason, I thought that they were just going to be like exact replicas of myself. And so I was extremely surprised when my son was absolutely nothing like me. And I had a really time understanding what he needed from me. I thought if I just parented him like I wish that I had been parented, then he would have everything he needed from me. But it became apparent that he needed very different things than what I needed when I was a kid. And so in trying to discover what he needed, I went about trying to understand his personality type, and finding his Myers-Briggs personality type really, really helped me in that journey of understanding what he needed. And I thought that that could help other people. And so I wanted to bring that to other people. And I found that podcasting was a really good way to do that. And so Family Personalities was born.
I love it. So would you share your personality type and that of son?
So I have INFJ preferences on the Myers-Briggs. My son has INTJ preferences. And so we actually do share the same lead cognitive function for anyone who's familiar with the cognitive functions in Myers-Briggs. And so we actually are quite similar in that way, but my son uses thinking, whereas I use feeling.
And so what was one of the key things or the shift that you made in terms of your approach to parenting that wasn't like you wanted to be parented yourself?
Yeah. So that thinking versus feeling is quite different in that as a child, I was definitely a people pleaser. That extroverted feeling is the harmony. You really want to kind of like go along to get along. You're trying to bring peace to every situation that you go into. You're trying to, you make decisions with the group in mind. And my son was not like that at all. Right. He was making decisions with, they call it kind of, or I call it, my nickname for it is efficient thinking. And so my son, every decision that he was making was with trying to kind of gain control over the situation. And it felt to me, this is not what it was at all, but to me, it always felt like he was trying to just say no to everything that I was proposing to him. It felt like he was going against everything that I was proposing, and like he was against me every step of the way. And so understanding his motivations was really, really important to bringing a little more peace to our relationship, and understanding that for him, he is more at peace in the world when he can have a little bit of control over it. When he, with extroverted thinking for kids, so for all of our TJs in the Myers-Briggs, if they understand the reasons behind things, for the little TJs in our lives, if they understand the reasons behind things, they're going to have a lot more buy-in. If they understand the rules in life, they're going to have a lot more buy-in. So if I could just explain the rules to him, explain the reasons behind the rules, I was a lot more likely to get his buy-in, and he's a lot more likely to go in on things with me. And he's going to feel a lot more in control. And that just made things a lot better between us.
So it created a little more harmony at home, which is sort of what you were striving for. Because you have to change it, just sort of switch a few things up.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you use personality to help parents and families either on the podcast or outside of it?
Yeah. So the podcast is one piece of what I do. I also work with families one-on-one. Sometimes I do workshops a little bit here and there. But basically how I use personality type to help parents and families is by typing parents and families. So helping you understand your personality type, the parent's personality type, their kid's personality type, everyone's personality type in the family, how they're the same, how they're different, how those personality types fit together, and where there's opportunities for connection, but also where there are some points in between personality types where we can actually trigger one another. So for example, between my son and my daughter, there's a part of his personality type where he's really strong, and it's a piece of him that is really comfortable, and it's actually a piece of her personality type that when he uses it, it actually triggers her and makes her really upset. And understanding that piece is really helpful in our family dynamic, so that I can kind of be aware of that and get ahead of it, I guess.
So one person's strengths is another person's weaknesses, and so it can
Mhm.
trigger something inside of them that might be at a deeper self-esteem level, like recognizing that I'm not good at that, so don't put that in my face.
Yeah, and that can happen between siblings, and it can happen between parent-child, it can happen between two parents, and understanding where those points are can be really helpful in understanding why some really simple point in a conversation, just like one little thing, can all of a sudden make someone really upset, and you don't really understand what just happened, and having words to put to that can really, like, de-escalate a situation.
Yeah, there are definitely those moments in families where you just don't quite understand why the whole thing just blew up. Like how
Yeah.
how did we just play off each other to end up in this situation?
Yeah, exactly.
So could you give me an example of another sort of family dynamic where there's been these crossovers and these clashes?
Yeah, there's one example, and she actually came on my podcast and talked about it. There's a mom who she's an INFJ like myself, and our lead function as an INFJ is very future focused, and it's called Introverted Intuition, and we really like the future. Actually excites us when we talk about the future, and a lot of times I always assumed that other people really like talking about the future as well. And she was having a hard time kind of connecting with one of her children. And as I was talking about earlier, we don't realize that sometimes when we have certain things that can actually trigger other people in our family. And she didn't realize that with her son, when she was talking about the future, she was actually triggering something in him. Her son has ESTP preferences. And his lead function as an ESTP, SPs lead with a function called extroverted sensing, and they're all about the present. And anytime she would talk to him about the future, he was a teenager and he was getting ready for college, he was feeling triggered by that. And because his lead function is all about the present moment, and thinking about the
Mm,
future and trying to think about future implications was actually quite triggering for him and stressing him out. And she found that, like, if they were taking a drive together and she would start bringing up the future, he'd get really upset and he'd cut her off and he didn't want to talk. And it was
right.
just as simple for her as understanding that, like, that's not a place that's comfortable for him to go. And she started connecting him with him much more when she would bring it to the present. What's practical? What's right now? What can we smell, taste, see, hear right now in the present moment? And she found she was able to just have some much more free flowing conversations with him.
So that's that NJSP tension in a way that
Mhm.
those two types share, but as a strength and a weakness.
Yeah. Another example of how you could use personality type in the family is between, like, a thinking and a feeling child. I have one child who prefers thinking, and I have one child who prefers feeling. My children were in a room coloring together. They were in the other room. I could overhear them. This was a couple years ago. They were pretty little. They were like maybe 4 and 6 years old. And I could hear them coloring together. And my daughter, who has a preference for feeling, was coloring like a unicorn or something. And she held up, the drawing or the coloring page for her brother, who has a preference for thinking. And she said, "Do you like my coloring, big brother?" And my son, who has a preference for thinking, said, "No, I don't like it." He said, "You colored out of the lines and I don't like the color purple." And my daughter, who has a preference for feeling, immediately started crying. And my son didn't really understand why. He's completely confused. And, I came into the room and I could have gotten mad at my son and said, like, why did you hurt her feelings? That was mean. But understanding that he has a preference for thinking, I knew that he wasn't trying to be mean, right? As kids who have a preference for thinking, they just tend to speak honestly. And he was just thinking logically that a drawing is not good if it colors out of the lines, and he doesn't like the color purple. And so he was speaking with honesty. Instead, I helped teach him a social rule, which is that, if someone asks you if their artwork is good, don't immediately tell them that you don't like their artwork. But then I had to explain why, because he needs to understand the reasons why. And if you can logically explain emotions to them, that can really help them. And so I explained that of how that scenario hurt her feelings, and then he was able to get there and, okay, now I understand why that hurt her feelings, and now I have a rule to apply to that situation, so I don't have to do the work each time to understanding why this would hurt someone's feelings, and I have a rule to follow going forward. And that he was able to apply, and he was able to, there going forward, not make that mistake again.
I would have loved a logical explanation of emotions as a kid. That would have been great. Thank you so much for sharing your story about family personalities and how we can use personality type in our family dynamic to help smooth over some of those situations where we get naturally triggered. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so it's Family Personalities anywhere. On your favorite podcast app, you can listen to Family Personalities. You can find me at familypersonalities.com, and I'm also Family Personalities on Instagram.
Thank you very much. Look forward to talking with you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, Samantha.